By late October 2013, the northwestern Pacific region had already produced 14 typhoons, and as the unlucky number 15 molded to form a cannot-be-forgotten killer, its name then soon becomes synonymous with devastation and heartbreaking loss. Haiyan.
We first noticed a weak disturbance southeast of Pohnpei Island, which is in the Micronesian Islands, the easternmost quadrant of the Micronesian Islands, on November 1st. And we kept tracking the area until we kind of saw a broad general circulation.
A day passed by. Now on November 4, the JMA and JTWC upgraded the depression into a tropical storm and named it Haiyan at 8 a.m. By November 5, the storm had begun rapidly increases its strength. The JTWC estimated Haiyan reached typhoon status at 8 a.m. that day, based on the information of an eye. The JMA followed suit 12 hours later when the JTWC assessed 1 minute sustained wind of 165 km per hour. Rapid intensification of the said minor typhoon continued until November 6 as an 11 km diameter pinhole eye formed. Intense change pattern around Haiyan's southern edge were also incorporated into the system. The JTWC estimated the system had reached super typhoon strength early on November 6. As the storm reached the Philippine area of responsibility, the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration, or also known PAG-ASA, gave it the local name Yolanda. Later, the typhoon eye passed over Palawan Island of Cayamel.
PAG-ASA issued Public Storm Warning Signal or PSWS number 1, the lowest of 4 levels, for 13 provinces in Visayas and Mindanao shortly before Haiyan entered the Philippine Area of Responsibility on November 6. As the storm approached the country, warnings were also given to Luzon as it became more severe in the east, resulting to PAG-ASA to issue Signal number 2 in 8 provinces and Signal number 1 in 27 provinces and 3 islands. PSWS number 4, the highest category of warning indicating winds in excess of 185 km per hour or 115 miles per hour, was issued for Biliran Island, Eastern Samar, Leyte, Northern Cebu, Metro Cebu, Samar, and Southern Leyte on evening of November 7.
Public Storm Warning Signal number 4 were also implemented to extend through November 8, including areas in southern Luzon. Policemen were spread in the Bicol region ahead of the storm. Classes were cancelled in the provinces of Samar and Leyte, and people in flood and landslide-prone areas were ordered to leave. A prior earthquake in Bohol also hit some of the storm-prone areas. Then current Philippine President Noynoy Aquino asked the military to send planes and helicopters to the impacted area. Due to the speed with which Haiyan was moving, PAG-ASA issued warnings at various levels to closely 60 of the 80 provinces, including the capital Metro Manila.
Yolanda made its first landfall at 4:40 a.m. at G1, Eastern Samar. It had such strong winds and massive rainfall. According to PAG-ASA, Super Typhoon Yolanda hadn't only become stronger compared to yesterday, November 7, 2013. On the same morning, around 7 o'clock, Super Typhoon Yolanda left G1. It destroyed all of their property, made 1,000 families homeless, and claimed the lives of more than 100 people as its disastrous intro to the people. Numerous buildings have also been destroyed in the totally destroyed place, including Giwan's Immaculate Conception Parish, Catholic Center of Worship, Town Plaza, Downtown, Vital Public Market, Transportation Hub, and many others.
Then, at 7 a.m. of the same day, Yolanda made its second landfall in Tolosa, Leyte. At this second landfall, Haiyan's full force hit the Philippines. Leyte's Region 8 had the highest number of fatalities, at about 5,902.
Almost every typhoon brings some flooding, but this typhoon is something else entirely. In minutes, the storm surge ravages the coastline, sweeping away weak buildings, bringing flood waters 20 feet deep. One reason for the extreme height of the surge is Tacloban's location. The city happens to sit in a relatively shallow protective bay. As the surge approaches, the shallow offshore terrain pushes the water up, and at the same time, the narrow confines of the bay squeeze the water, causing it to rise even
Surge
further.
event, strong onshore winds can really funnel water into these bays. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. These areas that tend to be the safest for cities or for marinas in a storm surge event often are the most dangerous.
The height of the surge brought horrendous flooding and destruction. But there's another reason that the surge is so deadly.
The exceptional thing about this storm surge with Super Typhoon Haiyan was the speed at which it came into some of these areas, like around the city of Tacloban.
Storm surges generally kind of come in increments, a foot or two, meter at a time.
It is rapidly shifting winds offshore that are causing the surge to come in with the speed of a tsunami. As the rotating storm approaches, the first winds to strike the bay came from the north of the eye, blowing north to south. That powerful force initially shoves water away from the city.
The winds were actually blowing offshore, and that was keeping the water away, or even producing what we call a negative storm surge, where sometimes water is actually pushed out of the bay.
Then, as the storm passes, winds coming from the south of the eye, blowing from the opposite direction, come into play. Water rushes back into the bay, pushed powerfully forward by the reversing winds.
And that's what produced the sudden, dangerous and deadly storm surge.
The city of Tacloban is inundated.
At the hospital, the staff uses floating mattresses to rescue the old and injured.
This is the level of the water. Up to here, the patient was floating. We slowly assist the patient in the hospital bed. There is a gushing of wind. There is a strong current of the water. The other patients were terrified, were in panic, and we assist the patients to be in that bed. The bed was to slowly carry the patient up to here so that we can have rescued here.
The water came so sudden. My children were crying. They were in panic. Everything floated like a paper. The refrigerator, the divider, the flat screen TV, and everything. It floated like a paper.
They have steeled themselves for high winds and torrential rains, but there's no way they could have foreseen this huge wave of fast-moving water, so unlike anything anyone living here have ever experienced.
We never consider the storm surge and the destruction that it will bring us.
It was a combination of the incredibly strong winds and the massive storm surge. And if you were in harm's way, you may have lost your life. If you didn't lose your life, I guarantee you, you were terrified.
the Nacolod mountain range was reached by the storm as Yolanda moved deeper into Leyte. As a result, it made the typhoon's central eye smaller. Its pace slowed slightly and the eye shrank from 20 nm to less than 10 nm, becoming cloudy. Despite the typhoon weakening, the shrinking eye maintained high wind speeds. At 8:06, the eye crossed the Nacolod and hit Ormoc City, still at a Category 5 strength. Yolanda then passed through another mountain range to the west of Ormoc before crossing the Cebu Strait.
At 9:33, Yolanda Eye was near on the Bantayan on the island of Cebu. Yolanda made another landfall on Bantayan Island 1 hour later, as it quickly went to Visayas and hit Iloilo after. The storm then increased into Category 4. Yolanda then emerged from Mindoro Strait after its longest line crossing yet at 8 o'clock p.m. The storm made its final Philippines landfall as strong as Category 4. Storm and Coron Palawan. November 8, Yolanda or Haiyan appeared over the South China Sea. During its encounter across the Philippines, the storm core had been severely weakened, with just a partial eye wall or remaining intact surrounding a ragged cloud-filled eye. Despite its appearance, the JTWC projected the winds of 230 km per hour will still present at peace.
By November 9, the storm showed signs of growing an eye. As cool, stable air began to wrap into the western side of it, environmental conditions ahead of the storm quickly lessened. As a result, shallowing convecting over the center occurred. As it went around the southwestern edge of the subtropical ridge that had earlier steered it westward, Haiyan turned more northwest on late November 9 and through November 10. Interaction with Hainan Island and Vietnam throughout November 10 weakened the storm as it passed over the Gulf of Tonkin. As Haiyan reached its final landfall in Vietnam, it weakened rapidly, with increased wind shear shifting convection to the north of the center of circulation. By this stage, the storm had also shifted northward as the subtropical ridge began to collapse. At 8 p.m. on November 11, Haiyan had dissipated as a tropical storm over Guangxi Province, China.
Hours after Haiyan made its landfall, it resulted to devastation after swashing the more than 7,000 islands that make up the Philippine archipelago. At least 6,000 people are dead, 1,800 missing, and estimated 4 million people homeless. In the immediate aftermath, survivors struggled to understand why this surge brought so much suffering.
Why so much dead, so much casualty with this typhoon? The media, the local media, even our own weather center, underestimated the surge. They were only monitoring the direction of this typhoon, the speed, and the strength, but never mentioning about the surge.
That's one of the reasons they were confident. They were staying at home because they do not know what is a storm surge.
They could have evacuated. Mandatory evacuation for all the people living in the sea line, 1 or 2 kilometers inland. But I think it did not happen. Nagka-brublag na lang kamo. Sana? Ito rin, okay. So they said that during the typhoon, they were actually here. They did not evacuate. They were here in this, there are 3 families inside. And when the surge came in, destroyed their house and split them up. And in the process, they lost a lot of their family members. The mother?
The mother, my 3 children and the 2 children of my sister.
The Philippine Weather Service did predict a large storm surge, but no one expected that it would come so quickly in places like Tacloban. A part of the challenge is predicting how strong will the typhoon be in the moment it reaches land.
That becomes a little bit difficult because you have a lot of complex things happening. How will these different ingredients, like the track of the storm, the wind speed, how will all of these things really affect the water height? We really have a long way to go with storm surge modeling. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
Surge models not only depend on coastal geography, but also on wind speed and direction on landfall. In a powerful typhoon, those variables can change rapidly, making the kind of precise prediction that might have saved Tacloban's extremely difficult situation, if not impossible.
Tacloban, which was devastated from Typhoon Haiyan, if you shift that track a little bit, in the next storm, they might not get a storm surge at all.
In the immediate aftermath of Haiyan, many survivors have struggled to get water, food, or shelter. Some places are so remote that eventual help is so slow to arrive. When some airports opened a day later, aid began to arrive for the victims of Typhoon Haiyan. Cargo planes carry high-energy biscuits, rice, water, and other supplies from the U.S. The U.S. military deployed a strike crew from Hong Kong and Japan, 9 ships, 23 helicopters, and 7,000 personnel to distribute 300 tons of aid to storm-ravaged places.
So this is a helicopter landing. It's one of the helicopters from the strike crew, and we're getting ready to load up more people and supplies. We are bringing food, water, supplies, shelter, and medicine to everyone that we can get supplies to. And right off the bat, we're trying to get to the most urgent need, typically people that are isolated on smaller islands that can only be accessed by boats or by helicopter.
In the first few days, military experience proves invaluable.
It's quite busy, but it's actually something that the military is very good at. And you know, I'm just a liaison, but I can tell you the Marine Corps logistics specialists, the Army and the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, they're all magicians when it comes to that, and I'm glad that we have them on our side. They make stuff happen and keep supplies at the front. In this case, the front is disaster relief.
In the immediate phase after a storm like this, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to rescue people who are in life-threatening situations, and we're trying to provide them care to save their lives. And then the second phase is to keep people safe and alive who survived the initial impact, because after about 72 hours, after about 3 days, people who survived but now need things like clean water, antibiotics, shelter, and didn't get it are not surviving.
Due to the great loss of life caused by the storm, the name Haiyan was retired from the SCAP or WMO Typhoon Committee's naming list during its 2014 annual session, and was then replaced by the name Bailu. The name debuted in the 2019 season. Pag-asa further stated that the name Yolanda would be removed from typhoon naming list. For the 2017 season, Pag-asa chose the name Yasmin to replace Yolanda.
On November 11, the provinces of Aklan, Capiz, Cebu, Iloilo, Leyte, Palawan, and Samar had been declared under a state of national calamity, allowing the government to use state funds for relief and rehabilitation as well as to control basic goods prices. Furthermore, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC had authorized roughly 30.6 million in disaster aid. For various actions, local and national authorities sent a total of 18,177 men, 844 vehicles, 44 seagoing boats, and 31 aircrafts. On the same day, the Catholic Bishop Conference of the Philippines established an 8-day period of mourning for typhoon victims.
Because of the lack of energy, planes could only fly during daylight hours, which slowed down the evacuations. Thousands of protesters flocked towards the planes around November 12, only to be pushed back by police and military forces. Later that day, a U.S. cargo plane experienced a similar scenario. Mayor Gonzalez of the coastal village Giwan, which bore the main hit of the typhoon's fury, is recognized for saving numerous lives after repeatedly urging locals to flee. He called the storm Delubyo, or Deluge, which loosely translates as Armageddon. Of the town's 45,000 citizens, 87 were killed, 931 were injured, and 23 were reported missing. On November 18, the Philippine government launched the Foreign Aid Transparency Hub, or FATE, an online platform that provides the public with a transparent picture of the finances and other aids received by the government from the international community. Philippine President Benigno Aquino III appointed Panfilo Lacson as Typhoon Haiyan's Rehabilitation Caesar to supervise administration and rehabilitation activities in the central regions of the Philippines by Typhoon Haiyan.
International aid also started to arrive at the country, in which were donated by the following countries and places: Australia, Bangladesh, Canada, China, Denmark, Finland, Vatican City, Iceland, Indonesia, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Kuwait, Malaysia, Mexico, Netherlands, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Taiwan, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, United States, and Vietnam. It brought a total of $556,243,000 on cash donations alone, about 24.68 billion pesos at the same time.
Criticism of the government's late response to the typhoon grew days after the storm passed. According to media sources, the Aquino administration was held accountable for the apparent lack of planning and cooperation among government institutions in the relief operation. Survivors struggled with basic requirements such as food, water, and shelter until November 12, 5 days after the typhoon struck, while relief had failed to reach distant villages in Leyte and Samar. The Philippine government responded by saying that they had dealt with the tragedy quite well, but that response had been slow due to the officials and employees, who were usually the first to respond in these events, were reported to be victims too of the typhoon themselves. Cabinet Secretary Almendras said that the national government had to take over the challenges and assure that it is working towards providing assistance. One of the most obvious and large issues surrounding Typhoon Haiyan is the number of victims, or the death count. According to Philippine government sources, the death toll from the typhoon ranged between 4,000 and 6,000 people. However, some reports believe that the actual number was closer to 15,000 people.
Days after the storm devastated much of the Visayas, the Philippines faced a humanitarian crisis, with 1.8 million people being homeless and more than 6 million people being displaced. 90% of the structures in Tacloban are either destroyed or damaged, while neighboring cities like Ormoc are reported to experience the same damage. The United Nations was concerned about the spread of disease as a result of lack of food, water, shelter, and medication. As a result of the destruction in Tacloban and much of Leyte, thousands of people who used to live there went to less affected areas such as Cebu and Manila, with a wave of survivors going to different cities following the typhoon. Catbalogan's population doubled.
Haiyan entered the Philippines without the people being warned of it, and then left with us crying out of grief. As the tale of sorrow left a great impact on our country, the cries of each victim haunt and continue to give us the lesson and the memories of the past. Some of the victims are still found struggling to strive and live up to this day, thinking that it may take them forever till they fully heal from the trauma and scar Haiyan made. May the Super Typhoon remind us that in every wave of problems, aiming to tear our hopes down, with the stage of healing being too far for us to touch, we should still be standing as long as we can.
The priority for Father Hector is his parish. This is a religious community, and for many, the church is needed more than ever.
We always have that strong spirit to rebuild in our own little way, in our own simple way. We don't have a roof on our head, but the thing is, they would do their best to celebrate that Mass. And I believe they would be coming in to be grateful to God for their lives.
What are we going to do? Even money to buy little things, we don't have any. So what are we going to do?
We're hoping, that big hope, that slowly we're going to make it back to normal again.
It's a tradition for Filipinos that they never give up. In spite of all these disasters, in spite of all the tragedies, they won't give up. We lost a lot of lives, and that's a fact that we have to accept and to live with. It will take some time. It's part of our culture that in spite of all the pain, the sufferings that we have endured, they're still smiling.